everyone, and welcome to the Redevelopment Commission meeting on April the 3rd, 2023. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Deb Hutton here.
Sarah Bowerly-Dansman here.
Randy Cassidy here.
Deborah, we didn't hear you.
You're on mute, Deborah. Okay.
Okay, I'll try it again. Deborah Myerson here. Thanks.
All right, Cindy Canardi here. Staff present?
John Zodi with the Hand Department.
Christina Finley, Hand Department.
Larry Allen, Legal Department.
Beth Kate, Legal Department.
Alex Crowley, Economic and Sustainable Development.
Jeff Underwood, Controller Treasurer.
All right. Next item on the agenda is reading of the minutes for March the 20th, 2023. Do any commissioners have any comments or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes of March 20th, 2023. Sarah Bowerly-Dansman.
Deb Hutton second.
All right, we have a first and a second. I need a vote via roll call, please.
Deb Hutton, yes.
Sarah Bowerly-Dansman, yes.
Randy Cassidy, yes.
Deborah Myerson, yes.
And Cindy Canardi, yes. Next item of business is examination of claims for March 31st, 2023 for $667,090.56. Do any commissioners have any comments or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Randy, you don't have any questions about that additional elevator charge?
I leave that to the individuals to take care of that.
All right.
Assume it's being dealt with.
Okay,
All
so
right.
Sarah Bowerly-Dansman, I'll motion to approve the claims of March 31st, 2023.
Randy Cassidy, I'll second.
We have a first and a second. I need a vote via
Oh.
roll call, please.
I misstated. I
Okay.
think that I think I said March 24th, but I meant March 31st. Sorry.
Got it.
All right.
Deb Hutton, yes.
Sarah Bowerly-Dansman, yes.
Randy Cassidy, yes.
Deborah Myerson, yes.
Cindy Canardi, yes. Next item on the agenda is examination of payroll registers for March 24th, 2023 for $32,383.64. Do any commissioners have any comments or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Randy Cassidy, I'll make a motion to approve.
Deb Hutton second.
Deborah Myerson, I'll second.
All right, we have a first and a second. I need a vote via roll call, please.
Deb Hutton, yes.
Sarah Bowerly-Dansman, yes.
Randy Cassidy, yes.
Deborah Myerson, yes.
And Cindy Canardi, yes. Next item of business, report of officers and committees. Is there a director's report?
There is, Madam President. Thanks, Commissioners. Good evening. Just a couple things on the staff side. We had our new Affordable Housing Program Manager, Stephanie LaFontaine, start today at hand, which is great. We're going to be interviewing for our assistant director position starting next week. The other item I had was, as you know, I sent an email to all the commissioners last week about asking a member of the Redevelopment Commission to be on the committee that is going to interview the finalists for what could be an owner's rep for the Hopewell project. This is to help push the ball forward on Hopewell as that development expands. By the way, we have our proposals due back on the first section next week. As we look at what else needs to be done there with representation, marketing, working with the development community, we're looking at bringing on an owner's rep. So I reached out to the commission via email. I think President Canardi has expressed some interest in being that member of the RDC to serve on that committee. So barring objection, that would be our representative.
You don't want to. I'll support you.
So that's my report. I've
All right.
done that.
All right, thank you. Is everybody okay if I serve on that? Any objections? Okay, all right. Next item is a legal report. Is there a legal report tonight?
I'm happy to answer any questions. No legal reports.
All right, is there a treasurer's report?
No report tonight, thank you.
All right, wonderful. Is business development updates?
I have a couple of things. One is I wanted to just update you on something that has an indirect association with the Redevelopment Commission. Tomorrow night, the mill primarily, but with staff support, will be presenting to the City Council a request for funding to help fill the construction gap that currently exists for the cost of constructing the Trades District, the EDA Trades District building. So that is going to, it's been read in as an appropriation ordinance, and it will be presented much more thoroughly tomorrow at council. So as an FYI, what happened to lead into that is that the Bloomington Industrial Development Advisory Commission, which is like the RDC, statutorily set up to have a very specific function. In this case, that commission was in charge of overseeing what's called a CREED district, and there are 2 of them in Bloomington. They have run their course, and the CREED districts, like in the case of other types of similar districts, TIF districts work somewhat in the same way. They set a baseline of, in this case, certain revenues that would go to the state, and then the increment over the years to that baseline come back to the city with certain caps, and that was a variable cap for each district, CREED district. Anyway, those monies have been accruing, have been invested along the way, but have also, there's a remaining balance. And so the request from council will be to take some of that balance and help fill the gap that exists. So I just want to make sure that everybody understood that was happening tomorrow. We'll let you know how it goes, and I'll certainly open it up to any questions if you have any.
Is that the closing down of the TIF, or just the CREED district and what's the other district?
There are 2 CREED districts. One is the downtown CREED,
and
the other is the Thompson CREED.
So they're going to close both of them down. There's approximately 17 million in the 2?
Combined.
Combined.
And the BIDAC, which is the commission that oversees those districts, that oversaw the fund that were derived from the district, the BIDAC voted to revert the money from district funds to the general fund, which then would need to be reappropriated, which is what the request is of council.
Okay.
That was the first thing. They voted to terminate the districts, and they voted to terminate the commission themselves because it had essentially ended its course. So that's all that happened last week, and so that kind of tidies up that part of it. And then now we're focused on trying to figure out if council can appropriate some monies to be able to fill the gap that exists right now.
Okay, will that gap include anything on the RDC since we're involved in that particular aspect?
Yeah, so the
As far as
RDC
what's the kind of dollar gap that that's seeking out? Is that going to come to the RDC and then go out, or is that just an appropriation from the council?
From the
Fill
council.
gap?
So right now, just broad strokes, the Economic Development Commission roughly committed $3.5 million in the grant. The RDC committed $2 million to the project. And there is a gap right now. It's an estimate because we haven't gone to bid yet, but there's a gap of $3.5 million. So the 3.5, the incremental 3.5 beyond the 2 million that the RDC has committed is what we are seeking appropriation for from the council.
Okay, and then the rest of the dollars, instead of being appropriated in those geographic areas that it was utilized for, will go right to the general fund and be used for whatever's necessary?
Well, that's to be determined. I think the ongoing use of those funds hasn't really been determined yet.
Determined. It's just consolidating them back in out of those districts.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
And funds.
Were there specific reasons for those districts when they were set up, as far as
Their CREED stands for Community Redevelopment, Revitalization, Enhancement District. And so in the case of Thompson, which actually was the first district the CREED district in the state, that was set up because Thompson had left. And so we had these potential, so there are 2 types of districts. One is a site-specific one, and one is a geographically defined one. And the Thompson one is a site-specific one. And that was very specific to the kind of industrial potential of the site, which had obviously just gone through a pretty significant shock at the time that district was set up. So if you look at it, you think to yourself, that could have been a real blight. Look at it now. It's a very successful use of CREED monies to help, and there were other monies that went into it, but to help kind of reactivate that site. The downtown similarly was having trouble with, it's sort of hard to believe, but it was having trouble with development. It was having trouble with wage growth. So some tactical investments along the way were really made to try to drive that, and And so we feel like in both of those cases, they were very successful uses of CREED funds.
And these creeds are not like some of the TIFs that they don't have any debt on them, so consequently, they're not required to be.
They're not tied down
Not
with
tied down.
obligations. I mean, there is always a potential that they could have an obligation, but in this case, they did not.
They did not.
And so that it's kind of a clean cut at the end.
So Alex, what was the date that they expired? Was it June of 2022? And just no action had been taken?
There were actually different expiration dates because they were set up at different times. And I'm going to do this from memory, but I believe that the downtown one was mid-year 2019. Is that right?
Yeah, Thompson.
Thompson was 2019, and downtown was June 22.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's sort of the end of the state fiscal year, which is different from our fiscal year. But yeah, so June 2022
Yeah.
for downtown.
And dollars weren't, this is just a general question, not necessarily, the dollars that were accumulated in those districts weren't required to be spent in those districts.
While the districts were active, that there was a geographic boundary to the expenditure. And in fact, there were other very strict rules about what you could use them for. And so when we were using them, we did invest them along the way. A recipient had to follow pretty strict guidelines. Like, it wasn't just for anything, right? I mean, there were some pretty specific things that you could do and not do. So all of that was done successfully in terms of applicants that had approached the city over the years to get investments. Once that ends, then it's really strategically you want to keep using it for the same type of stuff that its original intent was. But I think some of the boundaries around that are loosened because the districts are gone and the process is different.
Essentially, it'll free up $17 million to be utilized in other areas of the city that's needed.
Well, or those areas,
Well, that's what I'm saying,
yeah.
inclusive. Those areas are inclusive,
Yeah.
but they're not specifically tied to.
Necessarily,
It can now be
right.
reappropriated to an area that
For other types of industrial.
other types of industrial or community.
And so we
enhancements
feel like
necessary.
this Trades District Technology Center, which is about wage growth, it's about employment growth, it's really about the same kinds of things that the CREED districts originally were set up to do. We think that this is actually an appropriate use, even if technically it's not out of the CREED fund anymore, because those have been retired, but it's an appropriate use of those money that
We've
tie
saved.
closely to the original intent. So,
Okay, thank you.
mhm.
All right, any other questions?
I have a couple of other things,
Oh,
just
okay,
very
go
quickly,
ahead.
sorry. Just keep droning on here. This is a small one. The building at College Square, which I know is going to be on the agenda, the parking lot's going to be on the agenda, but I received a phone call at the end of the day on Friday from Chief Moore, who, as you know, the fire department is temporarily having their Station 1 in there. Apparently, there's an issue with the public access to the lobby, unaffiliated visitors, we'll put it that way, with any of the tenants who are accessing the building, and they are doing damage to the downstairs to the first floor bathroom. So it's kind of unfortunate. What seems to be happening is that they may be accessing it during the time that the front door is open, during business hours, hiding, and then after hours is when some of the damage is being done. So we are working with the fire department and also with our facilities to try to figure out the best way to address the situation. It seems like there's probably two likely ways. One is to lock that particular bathroom and then hand out the keys. It doesn't entirely eliminate access to the building, but it certainly, if that's an attraction point, it would eliminate that. If for some reason that doesn't work as much as we'd like, then we're going to be looking at possible other options, like even, unfortunately, limiting access to the building, which is not what we'd like to do, because as you know, there are tenants in there who have visitors all the time. So anyway, I just want to make sure that you knew that was going on, and we'll circle back with you, and we may come back with a funding request just on a kind of relatively small scale, just for locks and that sort of thing. And then just a reminder that the art show continues to go on. It's the One Drop Art Show at the 4th Street Garage Gallery Space, pop-up gallery space. If you haven't been there, I encourage you. Gallery hours, Thursdays, Fridays, afternoons, and Saturdays. And it's definitely cool and worth seeing if you haven't done it. So that's it.
Awesome, thank you, Alex. Let's move on to new business. Resolution 23-25, approval of purchase agreement for parking lot parcels at 216 South College Avenue. If you'd like to speak to us regarding this.
Do you want me to start?
Why don't you start?
Okay. So we talked about this a little bit before, but just to memorialize, so this is the parking lot that's outside of the building that Alex was just talking about, the College Square. There's technically 2 lots here. They're owned by Nancy Held and Thomas Six, brother and sister. We assumed a lease as part of the purchase of the Bunger building. Bunger and Robertson had been leasing that parking lots from the brother and sister. We had assumed that lease when we purchased it. In 2020, I believe, we had negotiated an addendum to that lease that had an option to purchase. At the end of that year, we extended our offer to purchase, which was the average of the 2 appraisals. And then we've been in negotiation since, back and forth. That's taken a long time. Recently, just in terms of keeping that negotiation going, we had come to an agreement, at least in principle, on a potential price that they would accept. That was $1.9 million, which was higher than the average of the 2 appraisals. And what it would do is it would consolidate that lot into one. So right now, where it's carved out, the Bunger property is kind of an L shape, and then there's these 2 parts that make up about 2/3 of the parking lot. This would combine all of that together. This was, just as a reminder for the public, but also just here publicly, this was the favored location of a potential convention center expansion. We did a large public charrette that identified this as the best and most likely option for an expanded convention center, and connecting it to the existing convention center and having those work kind of together in concert to provide not only new convention center space, but also to provide new public meeting space and things like that. This abuts the B line as well, so there's great access on all sides to this particular property. That's why it was one of the favored sites for an expanded convention center as well. What this would do, there's a purchase agreement attached to this. This is subject, obviously, to completing a phase 1 environmental, things like that, those kind of conditions precedent to closing, but this would be a purchase price of $1.9 million. It would come out of the consolidated TIF. We had also talked about this, if a convention center project gets going, this would be reimbursable back to the TIF out of food and beverage funds. Because it would go for that project, it would be out of that bonding for that project. And we're here, happy to answer any other questions or provide any other context that commissioners may like.
Can I just jump in?
Please.
Just to say that option to purchase was in 2021.
2021, thank you.
Not 2020.
What you just mentioned in regards to reimbursable from the food and beverage tax for this $1.9 million, which we understand is above the appraised value, would the food and beverage tax also reimburse the $4.995 that had previously been purchased by the redevelopment?
That was not in the plan as anticipated. I mean, Jeff Underwood's on here, so he can speak to that better. But originally, that was not in the plan. That would come from the consolidated TIF, and only this portion of the purchase would be reimbursed.
Would be a reimbursable aspect. Okay.
Yeah, I concur with Larry. It would, at the time, it was considered that we would transfer the Bunger Robertson partial, and that we could acquire these 2, that we would ask for reimbursement for those.
Okay. And from a standpoint, as we look at the F&B, which the city has a significant amount of portion, it has the funds in order to reimburse at some future point.
But it would be reimbursed through a bond issue, right? For the overall project, for an expanded convention center, if it should happen. Am I thinking about that right?
Last night it is determined, it would either be through bond proceeds or through cash. It would be dependent on the analysis that the financial advisors and bond counsel provided when they looked at the available funds that the city has on hand to finance that.
And Jeff, there is enough cash in the food and beverage currently, right? Theoretically, to cover this amount?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just clarifying the question.
And so, given that this is above the average of the 2 appraisals received, this does help us to consolidate real estate in, basically have a consolidated area within a city block. So can you talk a little bit about how acquiring this particular property will affect the value or our ability to do different things with the Bunger property that we already have bought, please?
Sure. I mean, I think the idea is that by consolidating these last pieces with what we've already purchased, that gives us a valuable full lot to do something with, whether it's the convention center expansion or really anything else, and that it will be much harder to do anything with the property we already hold without completing that purchase and without completing the city block, basically. So whatever we end up doing with it, including selling it, if it came to that. But the value it's much more difficult to realize the value of what we currently hold unless we can consolidate the rest of it.
I think I'd also just note in terms of the public charrette and the kind of preliminary, it was obviously very preliminary, this isn't the final design, but that design of the convention center actually had, so right now there's a parking lot that largely faces College Avenue, and instead the convention center would have frontage almost exactly on College Avenue to make that more walkable, and so that these lots would be directly where that building would go and kind of those public spaces would go as well.
Can I just ask on timeline perspective, and I want to be clear on what our, I guess, next steps could be. So next step 1 could be selling it. Should it be determined that it's not necessary for a project at some point. Step 2 or next step or next option would be, making it a part of the convention center, and then lastly would be something else. Yet to be determined.
Yeah, if you're asking, is that the right order in which we're thinking
No,
about?
I'm not thinking about order, I'm just thinking about just next steps for that.
I mean, and Jeff, feel free to jump in. I think the next step would be sitting down and saying, okay, so what now are the various uses to which we could put this property that would realize the sort of public value that we've been talking about and anticipating? Clearly, convention center expansion would be one of those. And that might then involve some further discussions with the county, which is sort of in the midst of trying to figure out what its next steps are on that. Other potential arts or civic engagement projects and uses for that property, and pretty much anything else. I think that would be the first next step, really, because a number of things are kind of talked about and discussed and everything. I'm really sitting down now and kind of scoping those out would be the next thing. So,
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Just one question, are there any limitations on the land use in terms of what the mission of the RDC is, and since the RDC has put up the acquisition funds for the property, are there any limitations in terms of, obviously civic use? Just wanted to clarify, if the city retains the property and let's just say it's not used for convention center expansion, which is already known, if there are other uses, are there any limits on what other uses that might be if it continues to be owned by the city in terms of the RDC's acquisition?
Nothing in terms of the RDC acquisition. It would be subject to all the UDO use restrictions. We've done this with several RDC properties. I'm sorry about that.
No, go ahead. No.
We've kind of imposed some of those use restrictions typically when we sold them to make sure that whether we're talking about affordable housing is coming in, but also in the trades district, for instance, we have imposed some use restrictions on purchase agreements there because we want to not have just student housing there. We need to encourage office space. We want to make sure that it serves the purpose of the certified tech park. So that would be something we'd have to evaluate at that time with whoever's making that decision. If a convention center, the county and the city agree that we're not going to do the convention center, we're going to do something else, then maybe we look at what's the highest and best use of the property at that time, and then consider when we put that out, we would have to put it out for public offering like we do any other property, and then consider some restrictions at that time, potentially above and beyond what's already in the Unified Development Ordinance.
Okay. At the present moment, if RDC acquires it, we're subject to the existing planning and UDO that is in place.
Yes.
So we have our restrictions. Anything that we want to be presented forward to convention center, anything of that nature that didn't fit, we would all have, the RDC on behalf, through the city would have to go through the planning process.
And the caveat here also would be also just environmentals, just to be clear. You know, this is subject to a phase 1, so we want to do a phase 1. As you all know, in the downtown Bloomington area, it seems like we had about 10,000 gas stations apparently at any given time. And so there's always a possibility of just finding something in the soil and that creating, it doesn't necessarily create use limitations, sometimes it does, but it creates a menu of options of what you want to do. If you don't want to remove the soil, sometimes you can't have first floor residential, for instance. There's just different standards. So that's something we would want to keep apprised of and just making sure you're aware of as we go forward, about what those options are, what the cost options are for those.
No, that's fine, yeah, I have nothing to add.
Any other questions? All right, not hearing any other questions, I'll entertain a motion for resolution 23. Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like to ask for any public comment.
There's something in the chat. Okay.
All right, I'm not seeing any public comment. All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion for resolution 23-25.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 23-25 for the purchase of the parking lots in front of the Bunger Robertson, with the caveat of if we purchase it and it goes through, that we can be reimbursed from the food and beverage.
So you're saying you would approve it, but the condition is if there is a convention center project that goes forward, the RDC would be reimbursed?
Yeah, that there's reimbursement at the convention
Can we
center.
say that?
Jeff, do you see any issue with that in terms of, I mean, certainly you can. I don't know that we just have to keep you apprised of that.
And subject to environmental,
Yeah,
of course.
okay.
Deb Hutton, second.
I might actually word it or any other source, because it could be that there's another source that we're not aware of now that comes into place at that point, so I wouldn't necessarily tie it directly into food and beverage, but, then you would be reimbursed.
Yeah.
Would you like to amend your motion?
Yeah, amend the motion to add to with any other source.
Reimbursed by any other
Reimbursed
source.
by any other source within the city.
Sorry.
Second, Deb Hutton.
All right, we have a first and a second on an amended resolution or amended motion. I need a vote via roll call, please.
Deb Hutton, yes.
Sarah Bowerly Dansman, yes.
Randy Cassidy, yes.
Deborah Mayerson, yes.
Cindy Kenarney, yes. Resolution passes. Next item on the agenda is resolution 23-30, agreement with Precision Quality Contraction to install fiber to the Showers Business Plaza. If you'd like to speak to us regarding this.
I can, did you want to speak?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I can speak to it unless we have I don't think we have anybody from IT here to speak to this necessarily. So as you are all obviously aware, you purchased the Showers Business Plaza on the other side. Part of that, we want to connect through a direct fiber connection, the city's IT infrastructure to bring our internet over there, which will aid kind of not only the office space, the general commonality, common space. It gives us access to security cameras to be able to link into the door access directly. And as we go through the design process of its future use, it can make this a usable office space where we can locate our design team there. And so this is a contract literally to take our fiber, drill a hole through the wall and connect it to everything that's over there. I will also note, this, just so you know, this is permission to do that. In fact, we've talked about, there was a bond issuance here for the upgrades to this building. Likely these types of projects will be paid for directly out of that bond, but we're using a TIF as a backup. So this is the first step in this. There's also some work that'll be done to the security cameras and the door access. That'll also be paid for the bond. We'll just keep you apprised as if we need that TIF backup, then we'll come to you and present that. But this is permission to actually physically go into the space and approve the contract, but this will be paid for actually directly out of that bond.
So are you asking for this now, just, you guys gotta get on it and make it happen?
Yep.
Therefore you can do it with this money?
That's right.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for resolution 23-30? Are there any public comments? Not hearing any, I'll entertain a motion for resolution 23-30.
Sarah Bowerly Dansman, I motion to approve resolution 23-30.
Deborah Meyerson, I'll second.
I have a first and a second. I need a vote via roll call, please.
Deb Hutton, yes.
Sarah Bowerly Dansman, yes.
Randy Cassidy, yes.
Deborah Meyerson, yes.
Cindy Canarney, yes. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 23-31, approval of electrical repair by Cassidy Electric for College Square property. Who'd like to speak to this?
Madam Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself from this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had mentioned this as part of the legal report last week, just in terms of a repair that cost over $5,000 to the College Square building again. This was for, I'm gonna pretend like I know what this is, but it's a phase 3 circuit breaker that they replaced, which is one of the big circuit breakers that serves the entire building. They needed to upgrade it just based on the load. They also improved some of the wiring leading into that circuit breaker, insulated the opening that they had made. And so this came out to be, with labor, $5,635.69 per resolution 2302, which is your general maintenance resolution. Anything that's over $5,000 has to be approved by you. So we're bringing this, and this would come out of that maintenance fund, which gets paid by rents, what we call the 444 account. If you ask me any other details about the electrical things, I will not be able to tell you, but I'm happy to get those answers to you later. Possibly Jeff Underwood knows, because I believe that Jeff knows literally everything, or Beth, she also knows literally everything. So they possibly can help us out. But.
So I guess the issue is, it is current need, and there's no way to wait for, say, well, we're gonna tear the building down for something, so we're not gonna bother. It's needed by the current tenants and the fire department and the other tenants. It needs to be done, so now it's gonna get done.
Yeah, and certainly when we relocated the fire department there, it just put a significant additional load on the electrical system. So
Sure.
I think that's what we're contending with now. It's a 24/7 constant use of the building.
Thank you.
So this has been properly bid, et cetera.
I believe so. This was taken care of by our facilities manager, JD Bora. So he followed whatever the city contracting rules are for doing this with Cassidy.
All right, any other questions from commissioners? Any public comment? Not hearing or seeing any, I'll entertain a motion for resolution 23-31.
Deb Hutton, I so make a motion to approve resolution 2331.
And Sarah Bowerly Dansman, I'll second.
We have a first and a second. I need a vote via roll call, please.
You need public comment?
No, I already asked for that.
Sorry. Deb Hutton, yes. Sorry.
Sarah Bowerly Dansman, yes.
Deborah Meyerson, yes.
Cindy Canarney, yes. Next item on the agenda, is there any business or general discussion tonight? Not hearing any, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Deb Hutton, so moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night, everyone.
Sorry, Cindy.